There are too many soldiers now. They would never let you take the Avatar. Must leave immediately. He wants to fight you so he can capture you, Zuko. Walk away!
It would have been fine if the film in any way delved into Zuko's inability to resist a fight like this, putting him in numerous scenes where he could have backed down, but he didn't, and he learns from it. But no, the film never earns this choice for Zuko. In fact, one of the only scenes where he does have a
welcome back.
walks away. The show, Zuko is dead at this point in his arc. So here, the one fight scene that actually would have been satisfying to see, Shyamalan just cuts and leaves. To show Zuko's. And the show already provided a moment for exactly this, and it didn't mean he had to fight. After Zhao is taken by an ocean spirit, Zuko reaches out to save him, showing that despite their conflict, he didn't actually want to die, despite the fact that the man himself had tried to get him killed. Zuko has empathy even in his enemies, and Iroh's line here is phrased. It implies that Zuko is walking away because he doesn't want to get captured, and not because he's grown. Oh, and then when it comes to Zhao's death, Shyamalan just swaps it out from him being killed by the ocean spirit for a bunch of random waterbending nobodies. I love seeing a major character get killed by, Waterbender number 4. In the show, Zhao's death arises from his own flaws. There's an irony to him being killed by one of the great spirits after he had killed the moon spirit himself. It's a kind of poetic justice that speaks to how you should not underestimate the spirits like he did. It's a subtle moment of world building in its own right. His end reflects his character, like how Ned Stark's honor gets him killed in Game of Thrones. Now, Iroh tells Zhao right before he dies,
You stand alone. And that's always been your mistake.
But is it? Has the story in any way tried to emphasize this? To then have him defeated by a group of people standing together is reflective of this on the surface. But when there's actually nothing to highlight this weakness throughout the story, it's just shallow. The show goes out of its way to repeatedly demonstrate how Zhao's pride and arrogance is his weakness, that he believes he can stand up to the spirits, godlike beings, when of course, he can't.
Wow.
But weirdly still, Shyamalan takes this exact shot of Zhao's death from the show, this image of Zhao being drowned. Shyamalan knows that we loved this moment, but I don't think he quite understands why this moment was so satisfying on a narrative level. And by this point, you've probably picked up on a recurring theme of this film, and it's not just that we should let the heat death of the universe happen right now, though if it happens at the speed of the firebenders, we've probably got plenty of time. But I need to show you something. A golden moment, a guilty pleasure, not technically part of the film, but still very much from the creative genius of M. Night Shyamalan. It is easily the worst fight scene I have ever seen, so bad that even Shyamalan cut it from his film. How do you film a fight scene this bad? I would explain why it's so bad, but that would be giving you exposition that you already know because it's so obvious from the scene at hand. And there are scenes where actors were clearly told that there would be waterbending, but the visual effects budget just ran out. I cannot get enough of this film. Book 4, I think. Are you the Avatar Al? I've talked a little bit about how exposition runs rife in Shyamalan's screenplay, but we need to narrow in on just how bad the script is itself. Because I don't think I've ever read a less competent script from a multi-million-dollar studio. No. You don't understand. And do not forget that 10% of the script could just be cut with no consequence whatsoever. So to start, let's talk about a really bizarre trait of Shyamalan's writing in this film. Repeated words.
Okay, so what have you found, you teachers? Teachers to teach you bending. Which element would you have to learn first?
There was a very spiritual place. The city was built around this place. But they must have.
The Fire Nation knew the Avatar would be born into the air nomads. So they exterminated all the air nomads.
A lot of the villages in this part of the Earth Kingdom are occupied by the Fire Nation, like this village was. They preyed the weakest towns and villages. We should go visit some of these towns on. You could fall in love here. We could settle down here. You could live a blessed life.
I mean, people don't talk like this, at least not people in film. Film creates the illusion of realism more than it is realistic a lot of the time. But this repetition is another one of those really subtle things that makes this dialogue jarring and awkward. The word visit carries so much less weight than saying, we'll free them. So let's think about how easily these lines could be fixed. Sokka saying, okay, so what if we found you a teacher? Which element would you need to learn first? Or Yue saying, our people do have a sacred site. The city was built around it. Katara saying, the Fire Nation knew the Avatar would be born into the air nomads, so they exterminated them. Sokka saying, the Fire Nation occupies a lot of villages in this part of the Earth Kingdom. They prey on the weakest of them. But we could free them, eh? Could. Or Iroh saying, you could fall in love here. Settle down, Zuko. There is honor in a simple life like this. I'm not even saying these rewrites are good. They're just super obvious tweaks that at least make it better. And I'm a disheveled gremlin whose writing's with dirt. But at least I proofread my work before I throw it in the trash. Right next to my law degree. And then there is my favorite exchange in the entire film.
This was you when you were born an Earthbender 2 lifetimes ago. You came to our village. Avatar Kyoshi loves games.
I do too. I mean, still.
I can't even put into words why I find this so funny. It's so bizarre. It's so out of place. It's just, this is Kyoshi. She liked games. Oh, I like games too. Why was this included? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because once again, Shyamalan saw a Kyoshi statue in the series and thought that, like children, we would applaud because we get the reference, but he doesn't include any of the meaning behind it. Either that Kyoshi's morality was vastly different to Aang's, or her legacy in the Kyoshi warriors who challenged Sokka's sexism, which he hasn't even had set up in the film. Once again, it's a snapshot with no depth. I mean, there's nothing else in this scene, which is part of why it just makes it so mind-bafflingly funny. No conflicts, no character change, no need or want. Everything in this film is surface level. It's recognizable but devoid of purpose. And Shyamalan's script is full of weird lines like these, which, while not strictly wrong or incorrect, are just not how people speak.
I knew from the first time we discovered you were a bender that one day I would realize your destiny.
Our spies have discovered someone claiming to be the Avatar. They describe him as just a boy. We should set the trap for this person. We have many Earth Kingdom people under our control. I can leave soldiers hidden in certain locations.
The Fire Nation knew the Avatar would be born into the air nomads. So they exterminated all the air nomads.
Phrases like, I would realize your destiny, are awkward, and who would say, I can leave soldiers in certain locations, I don't know where. Exterminated is also a very peculiar word to use, especially for a child and in such a supposedly emotional moment. It would be far more natural for them to simply say, they killed them all. Characters constantly say things that either others would already know or wouldn't make sense to bring up in this context. Aang saying, the Fire Nation is up to something after being captured by Zuko is the equivalent of the worst detective arriving on a crime scene with a sprawled corpse to go, I'm starting to think something went down here. The end result is that characters don't feel real because they aren't speaking real. Zhao using terms like boy and this person in sentences immediately following one another just screams to me of a newbie writer desperately trying to find different ways to say the same thing. It's a trait of weak writing. The unifying brand to how people talk in this film is either Wikipedia entry or stilted Microsoft SAN. Generally, you script things for two reasons. One, because the character would say them, and two, because the audience needs to hear it. If you're good, then every line ticks both of these boxes, but you will rarely find that in this film. Instead, awkward phrasing like this means that characters would rarely speak as they do, and the main point of their line is often exposition. At best, you're ticking one of them, sometimes neither of them. And the few scenes in which characters tick both of those boxes, like the one between Iroh and Zuko leading up to the assassination attempt, Shyamalan really fails to use the tense questions that the scene has to offer to drive anything interesting. Iroh asks where Zuko has been for 4 days, and Zuko is reluctant to say. Great! We have Zuko withholding the truth and Iroh concerned for his nephew's well-being, concerned with them becoming more reckless. We have conflict. Yet where most screenwriters would have Iroh, the supposed quote-unquote mentor character, despite full evidence to the contrary, push Zuko to give him an answer, throwing Zuko into anger, and Iroh insisting that it's only because he loves him, Shyamalan simply lets the moment pass on, without furthering their relationship at all. Now, the show doesn't push this moment much either, but that's because importantly, the show is just littered with scenes of Iroh showing compassion and concern for Zuko isolating himself. Those are the important scenes there, but this is just a damn missed opportunity, of which, might I add, Shyamalan has given himself very few. I just can't get over how Iroh couldn't even have just one meaningful scene between Iroh and Zuko, but he can't! And the closest we get is like halfway through the film. Kill me. This is about Shyamalan using the film's limited screen time as efficiently as possible, which he seemingly refuses to do.
Our spies have discovered someone claiming to be the Avatar.
My name is Al. And I'm the Avatar.
Our spies have discovered someone claiming to be the Avatar. Our spies.
The deductive skills of these spies is unmatched. I would have never figured it out. Book, next one? If I were Satan employing new creatures to torture Hell's many inhabitants, I would reject this decrepit gremlin monkey and soulless carnivorous minotaur for being too terrifying to look at. Appa and Momo are the sleep paralysis demons that you fear will grab your ankles in the middle of the night and drag you down to the depths of the earth. And Shyamalan knows it. Oh, and Shyamalan does his absolute damnedest to keep Appa and Momo off screen for as much as possible, and especially to stop you from ever seeing Appa's face. And once you notice that, you won't be able to unsee it. And they basically only return to remind you that they do indeed exist, but so sparingly that you're not actually sure that they do. Hey, just like our sleep paralysis demons, so it fits! Seriously, they leave the frame whenever possible. Appa is basically just a flying piece of furniture in this film, and with his eyes facing the front, it's really disconcerting. Like he's a predator, a murderer. And Momo too. But why? Now I know. The Fire Beasts didn't kill the air nomads. But if not them, then who? So, on the one hand, it's terrible that two adorable, well-loved and comedic characters were so freaking wasted, but on the other, I am really glad I did not have to see their faces for long. So, Shyamalan is a horror, thriller, a plant, monster director, I don't know, I never watched that film. Whatever he is, he was not familiar with the filmmaking language of these fast-paced, ensemble cast fantasy films. And it shows, most obviously in his truly bizarre use of establishing shots. So welcome to Year 10 Film Studies, because that is all you need to point out why these shots are so terrible.
I have had no word of my son for quite some time. Do you know where he is?
I've not heard of anything, sire. Sure word of him will come to us soon.
The Northern Water Tribe benders are given their strength by their moon and ocean spirit.
Establishing shots are, shockingly, meant to establish something, usually place, time, atmosphere. But what does this tell us about the Fire Nation? Well, nothing. The shot is basically empty, our eyes aren't drawn to anything, and while sometimes establishing shots do start empty, they always build up to reveal something. But here, what we see at the start is what we see at the end. The interesting architecture is washed out and obscured by a thick line of trees, and for most of the shot, the trees are actually front and center. It doesn't establish anything. In contrast, take a look at these establishing shots of Minas Tirith and Edoras. Not only do both of them actually reveal something, but the music accompanying it tells us something about the place. Edoras has a somber and kind of sad theme, reflective of the decay inside the city itself, which is Theoden's madness. The opening of the Fire Nation tells us, nothing. The music isn't distinctive, it isn't emotive, it doesn't highlight Ozai's villainy or Zhao's infinite threat. The shot itself doesn't tell us anything about the grandness of the Fire Nation, the greatness of its civilization. And this isn't even the first time that Shyamalan gives us a flat, boring, non-establishing shot for the Fire Nation specifically. Yeah, in Ozai's first scene, we get this. It's too dark to make anything out at all, it's this utterly featureless landscape, and it's meant to be the homeland of the most dangerous man in the world, and the most powerful nation in the world, but it's just nothing. It's really boring. I mean, the original capital is set inside a volcanic crater. It's awesome. It's a real spectacle.
Come on, man. Come on.
Oh, and it doesn't get any better when we get to the iconic throne room, because, well, there's this weird light coming from, sources? I mean, I'm not one to nitpick things like this, but it's even obvious to me that Shyamalan was trying to use the flames to create some kind of ominous air, but there is not a single shadow from the fires shaping the room, or in particular, our view of Ozai. And it gets even funnier because apparently, this was filmed in a high school gym, and now that you know that, you can just see the basketball hoop right above Xiao's head. It's got the sound and the framing of it, like, I got it! The Avatar on? But I promise, Shyamalan showing us the true glory of the Fire Nation gets even better, because Ozai's generals came to him and said, Fire Lord, our armies have taken new territory in the Earth Kingdom. What shall we call it? How about Azuland, or New Ozai? No. We shall call it Fire Nation Colony 15! I want us to be the most boring empire in history! I mean, I'm half convinced that Shyamalan just did this film for the meme now. The film is full to the brim with these flat, directionless, energyless shots with no subtext or meaning, or the meaning that he imbues it with is far weaker than whatever it should have been. But, hey, it's better to be boring than whatever the hell the spirit world was meant to be. Shyamalan must have seen J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek lens flare and was like, yes, that turns me on. And it's also really funny when you realise that all the little bits of shrubbery in the air temple are actually so hardy that they don't even move under the whirlwind that Aang creates. They move just as much when he stops. Or how about this moment? Uncle, look! It's just so obviously not being said by Zuko here and now, and hey, doesn't matter. No. Is it funny? Yes. Book 666. Bring it on. The more I watched The Last Airbender, the more one question began to bug me. What does it mean to make a good adaptation? For a long time, I thought this was to do with being loyal to the original source material, but this film really challenged my belief on that. Shyamalan uses dozens of shots, lines, and imagery that are taken directly from the show, sometimes perfectly replicated to a degree that I don't think I've seen anywhere else before.
What's going on?
The Avatar must be captured alive! Avatar, to the state! Close all the gates immediately!
And I think it's fair to say that Shyamalan clearly cared so much about replicating these moments that sometimes it even looks odd when translated to film. It's unreal and awkward. The shot where Zuko breaks Aang's chains is jarring in live action. This is actually a level of adaptive attention you wouldn't usually expect from a filmmaker. Aang's sphere is a near exact replica from the series, right down to the wavy veins and how the lights formed. The spirit oasis from the Northern Water Tribe is near identical too, and the Avatar statues from the Southern Air Temple. The thing is, when so much of the script and visuals are lifted from the original source material, my expectation would be to love the film. But I didn't, obviously. I hated it. So this leaves me with a crisis. I'm a New Zealander, alright? Which of course means that I love Marmite. Real Marmite, not that British crap. But it also means that I love The Lord of the Rings, the film series. And when people ask me why, I often say that the films are really loyal to the original book, not just because it's the closest thing we have to a New Zealand porn industry, but its depiction of Edoras, Gondor, and the Shire are all very closely taken from the books. But more than that, the screenwriters Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson took a lot of the script directly from the page. And that's not easy to do because there is a lot of book. But
My bad
if
at
anything,
math.
The Last Airbender stands as testament to the idea that adapting something faithfully isn't just about following the script
65
and looking like the original source
steps.
material. Because this
Divided
film
by
does that
5,
to a
because that's how many
stupidly
times it
impressive
triggers.
degree. And that's because it made me think about how there's a much
Multiply
deeper
it by
layer
2,
to
which
what
is the
makes up the
amount of
work than
TP
just what we
restored,
see
and
and
it's a
hear.
net
It's about how everything that we see
negative.
and hear relates to one
It is a
another,
ridiculously
how they work
negative
together.
net.
No one answered. The noon bell rang. Still no one spoke.
That is a net negative of
Frodo
54
glanced at all the
TP.
faces, but they were not turned to him. All the council sat with downcast eyes, as if in deep thought. A great dread fell on him, as if he was awaiting the pronouncement of some doom that he had long foreseen and vainly hoped might after all never be spoken. An overwhelming longing to rest and remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled his heart. At last, with an effort he spoke, and wanted to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice. "I will take the ring," he said, "though I do not know the way." Peter Jackson didn't just show me what the Council of Elrond looked like. It's not Frodo saying this last line that makes it a
I
faithful
immediately
adaptation.
already
Peter
regret
Jackson
getting
managed
this.
to capture the somber, fearful, sorrowful mantle that Frodo takes up. The sense of a small
Although to be
person
fair, there
entering a
isn't
world
much
far bigger
else
than he,
that's
trembling
good.
at its shadows,
Although I
but
guess you
knowing
could
he
argue I
must
could have
and
gotten
still standing.
preludes
And as I watched the
a little
film,
earlier
I realized
instead.
that this was Shyamalan's most critical flaw. Shyamalan understood that we loved particular moments from the story, but he didn't understand why we loved those moments. There's a scene in the film after Zuko saves Aang as the Blue Spirit, where Aang is looking over an unconscious Zuko. Then he leaves, and the shot of Aang leaping into the trees and away is extremely similar to how he does it in the show, as well as how Zuko is lying down while unconscious. But in the show, Aang asks if they could have been friends before the war, and it's only after Zuko listens and then responds with a bolt of fire that he leaves. The film does none of this, as in, there's no real point to this scene. Shyamalan understood that we loved this epilogue to that episode, where Aang saves and watches over an unconscious Zuko and then leaves in the trees, but he gives none of the context that makes this scene meaningful. And what's even worse, what's even more bizarre and strange, is that Aang actually has this line later in the film.
We can be friends, you know.
But it's so offhanded and underplayed, it feels like it was thrown in haphazardly at the last moment, and it's phrased more as Aang turning his back on Zuko than him earnestly reaching out to trust him. Why not have that moment here? The scene is meant to put Zuko in a position where his conscience can truly be tested, by saving Aang from the Fire Nation, and then being saved by him, and then listening to Aang as he talks. The audience is tempted by the idea that Zuko might choose friendship. The scene gives Zuko the opportunity to grow as a person and let Aang go. It's a small crisis point in his character arc, and those moments are really important because they're what make Zuko's eventual turn to the good feel earned. There's been struggle, progress, setbacks, strife, moments where he could have turned but failed to. A ton of the film dialogue is taken directly from the show, and Shyamalan is replicating a lot of shots from the episodes themselves. But he doesn't understand why that dialogue, why these shots are there. He seemed to think that if he referenced all of these things, it would be enough for us to love it, because we'd go, hey, I recognize that thing! But it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. And he does this over and over and over again, with perhaps the most egregious example being Sokka's character, or should I say, the lack of Sokka's character. Sokka has the fewest lines of the main characters at just 49, a whole third less than Katara, and every story beat of his in The Last Airbender is either cut completely, like his growth of the Kyoshi Warriors, or it's transferred to another character. And none of this is helped by him being totally joyless and never being shown to be a gifted strategist or leader, nor does his skepticism ever save the group like it does in the episode Jet. He has nothing. He only has 2 lines in the entire Southern Air Temple sequence, which was originally used to build relational tension between him and Katara, and help define his place in the group as being more of a realist, insisting that they need to tell Aang what happened. But there's none of that here. In fact, there's none of anything here. At all. Ever. He is barely a character, and that's only because he technically has lines, I suppose. He's never shown to have any meaningful role in the web of characters here, to have any need for what he has to say or what he believes, yet Shyamalan still has the audacity to use Sokka as the emotional linchpin for his ending in Yue's death.
My brother and the princess became friends right away.
Shyamalan doesn't even show us this relationship unfolding, but his real crime is that he expects us to care about Sokka losing her when he has done nothing whatsoever to make us care about Sokka in the first place. He has no arc, he has no wants, he has no needs, no struggles, nothing to root him in an emotional reality, and yet, Shyamalan has the audacity to expect us to care. We barely know him, let alone Yue. In fact, I kid you not when I say that her name is only mentioned once before the scene where she dies. Once! And she's meant to be the emotional linchpin of the film. I mean, this is just a total failure of setup and payoff. But it's also Shyamalan doing that same thing again. He saw that the scene meant something to people, but he didn't understand why. It's not simply because Yue dies, that's not enough, it's because we care about Sokka. This is the ghost of screenwriting past coming back to haunt Shyamalan because he wasn't willing to emotionally set up his own ending. And though this is the biggest example, this isn't even the first time Shyamalan has made this problem for himself in this film. All the way back at the beginning, they visit the Southern Air Temple, where Aang is meant to learn about the genocide of his people, a horrible ordeal. So one of the differences between fiction and real life is that in fiction, I am a buff, sexy dragon slayer with no depressive tendencies, and feeling like I'm on the horrific, inevitable decline now that I'm about to reach 25. It's all downhill from here. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Where was I? Oh yeah. One of the differences between fiction and reality is that it's a lot more important to personalize tragedies of a massive scale, like genocide in fiction. It's hard for our small minds to truly grasp the mechanized horror and scale of things like the Holocaust. So when teaching it to kids, we scale it down to the story of, say, Anne Frank. It's a lot harder to emotionally grasp, and this is even more important in fiction because we
I didn't give a shit about Anne Frank.
Whatever the great tragedy was, it didn't happen. So Shyamalan needs to make us care
It's just
about
a simple
the
truth.
genocide through Aang, but at this point in the film, we don't know Aang at all. In fact, Aang's
About
had just
education,
3 lines up to this point in the
it's
film,
fucking
and
boring.
we know next to nothing about what he wants, what he loves, what he fears, what he hates, his weaknesses, his strengths. The closest we get is that he says Monkey Atsu is kind of like a father figure to him.
When something
But
is
this
mandatory,
wasn't shown, and barely
the
30
only
seconds
thing
before
you, the
reveal.
only choice you
Again,
have is
this
whether or not
Shyamalan
you'll
expecting
enjoy
us to
something.
care before giving us
Whether or not you'll enjoy said
care.
mandatory
And the
thing.
problems don't stop here. Shyamalan saw that Katara brought Aang back from the Avatar state, from that grief and that anger, but he doesn't seem to understand
And
why
when you're
that
forced to
worked
do
narratively.
anything, it's
In the show,
really
she
easy
calls out to him saying that she knows
to
what
want
it's
to
like
hate
to lose
something.
family, that her mother was basically murdered in front of him. She draws a parallel between Aang and herself so that he doesn't feel alone. And loneliness is a big struggle for Aang here. It's a big struggle for him throughout the series. Aang is the last of his people. He's the last airbender. So, in the film, when Katara is yelling,
Let's back. So good.
it isn't nearly as powerful because she's not saying anything that draws a meaningful connection between him and her. Oh, and let alone the fact that this would have been a way better place to introduce the exposition that her mother was killed, and the knowledge of the spirit world, given that Aang ends up here, kind of confused. He would be what we call an unknowledgeable perspective character, meaning that he would naturally be asking, what is this place? A character wants information, and so, to some degree, the audience would as well. You are in the other world, says the dragon, the spirit realm, and that is all you would need. It is not particularly creative, sure, but it's a hell of a lot better than Grand the Exposition vending machine. But hey, maybe Shyamalan can be forgiven for all of these things that he omitted. There's a million reasons things get cut from a film, through the script or the editing. whatever, I'm sure there's stuff that I don't even know. Maybe Shyamalan's a genius who was just, kept back and would have been a great success if not for that pesky Shyamalan. Yeah, let's go with that. Except it's not just about the context that he omitted, it's about the stuff that he actually directed to happen, that he made happen. There are two scenes in Book 1 where Iroh and Zhao are speaking before the invasion of the Northern Water Tribe. Zhao is full of delusions of grandeur, and Iroh cautions him about history, tampering with the spirits. When Zhao says, "It'll be nothing like your failure at Ba Sing Se," Iroh's expression is humble, sad, and full of memory. He says, "I hope not, for your sake." Zhao is condescending to Iroh by pointing out his failures, but Iroh doesn't rise to it at all, and his reply speaks to his deep feelings of empathy and the loss he faced at Ba Sing Se, his son, Lu Ten, which is where that empathy really comes from. He knows what it's like to be full of delusions of grandeur that lead to great personal loss. He doesn't want that for anyone. The delivery and phrasing of the scene in the show is full of subtext and character. Okay, so that's great. Now let's look at how Shyamalan directed this exchange to go in his film. When reminded of his failure at Ba Sing Se, Iroh rolls his eyes and is clearly aggravated and annoyed at the reminder. He doesn't say anything or wish Zhao the best for his own sake. He doesn't express any modicum of empathy at all. In fact, Zhao also compliments him as a brilliant strategist in the film, to which Film Iroh smiles and looks proud of himself, remembering his military history, which again misses the point that Iroh is ashamed of his militarism in his past. Why does this matter though? Well, Iroh's empathy extending to even his enemies is a critical trait that Zuko gets from him, but there is simply no sense of that in Shyamalan's Iroh. And again, changing characters when adapting is fine. It is fine that Paku isn't super sexist and Zhao is less psychopathic. But no man is an island. Characters have a place in the web of arcs and themes that weave them all together to create a story, and Iroh has a specific place in Zuko's as his canary in the coal mine, having already gone through the tragedy, loss, and anger of his own and grown into a more empathetic, self-controlled, kind man. It is that dynamic between Iroh and Zuko that facilitates his growth and makes Zuko's change possible. And Shyamalan does seem to be going for Zuko's redemption arc in this film, or at least planning to set it up for sequels. But even in little scenes like this, Shyamalan misunderstands how these characters are woven together to make that redemption happen, to make it believable, to make it meaningful. See, once again, Shyamalan only understands the surface-level purpose to a scene, that Zhao and Iroh stood together at the top of a boat and talked about their past, in Ba Sing Se and the invasion. But he doesn't get what this scene is really about. It's about Iroh's empathy and loss stemming from violence. Zuko's arc in the film is far weaker because of this, because he doesn't have that moral counterweight against his darker impulses. We just simply don't get to see that pushback that
if I went for TP up,
because for most
that
of this
would make
film,
Jovial
Iroh
March
just
a little
appears
more
totally
tolerable.
apathetic. And that's pathetic. An adaptation can't just steal
Since
moments
Marit's gonna
from the
have
original
so
source
much
material,
TP,
patch
she
them
may as
together
well
like some
share it,
Frankenstein
right?
summer project and expect it to be good. You're relying on that shallow response from the audience going, "Hey, I recognize that," but being recognizable is a pretty low bar. I mean, The Rise of Skywalker is well known by now as a tragedy of Palpatinian proportions, and it is filled with moments that play to audience nostalgia. It was a laughable flaw to the film. Obsessive and constant referentiality reduce it to a haphazard mess of disconnected moments more concerned with familiarity than feeling. Because the running theme of Shyamalan's work here is this constant disconnected referentiality, even down to the smallest moments. Aang uses these fights in battle. It's a reference to Katara's duel with Paku, but its real adaptive purpose is so that people recognize it, and Shyamalan hopes that that will be enough. But I'm not that stupid, and neither are you. It renders your story into a largely disconnected mess, because these moments that Shyamalan plucked from the show don't exist in isolation. He doesn't truly build up to his emotional and climactic beats. He just recognizes that certain things happen at roughly certain points in the plot structure, and hopes that we recognize it too, projecting our feelings and that context that it really needs onto it. There's a line in the film where Zuko talks about how his sister had everything come easy to her, while his father resents him. It pulls from a great scene in the show finale, but Zuko in the show is comparing Aang to Azula, as they're both prodigies, natural benders, while Zuko is had to fight for whatever he has. Shyamalan Zuko, though, lacks the depth of him projecting his insecurities outwardly onto others in anger that build up to a moment like this. There's no real reason for the scene other than that #recognition. See, The Last Airbender made me realize that being a good adaptation isn't just about replicating my favourite moments from the show into a film. It's a lot more to do with faithfully drawing complete story threads into a new medium. Now, I know this is going to sound weird, but stick with me. I promise this is related because in 2007, The Lord of the Rings the Musical was performed in Toronto with a record $25 million budget, only to be the biggest failure in West End musical history. Not only did it lose a huge amount of money, and not only was it apparently terrible, but it was dramatically shut down when one of the main actors got their leg caught in the moving stage machinery, only for their horrific caterwauling cries to be heard as their legs snapped and the curtains closed. But hey, I mean, the music isn't actually that terrible. The songs Now and For Always and The Road Goes Ever On are really heartwarming and moving and catchy. But I think that the main reason that it sucked is that The Lord of the Rings just has too much story to adapt to the stage, even with 3.5 hours, which it had. It ended up having random beats from the book make up a disconnected story without fully adapting any of the meaningful threads. Say, Frodo's struggle with the ring, Pippin's maturation, Aragorn's quest to kinghood. There were moments for each of these things, but none of them were ever given the full arc they needed. But I've always had this weird curiosity that I would love to see a Lord of the Rings musical that only followed Frodo and Sam's story, that followed that story thread and did it well. They're the ones who actually sing those two songs. We wouldn't see the entirety of the epic story, but it would still be a faithful adaptation to me. It would realize one story thread incredibly closely and beautifully. The point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't matter if everything you put on screen is technically from the original source material, if none of the story threads that actually make up the story are done well. And Shyamalan totally fails at this. And it's not hard to figure out where this really came from.
So you've seen the first 2 episodes of Season 3. Are you excited for the rest of the season and the finale of Avatar?
I can't wait. We've been watching the first 2 over and over and over at our house, haven't we?
Shyamalan hadn't even finished the series when he was making this film. This interview was filmed in 2009, by which time the script had already been well written and they had already far moved into shooting. Shyamalan hadn't even fully experienced